I think we're a go. Hi, hello, and welcome. I have officially made the jump onto the big screen of YouTube and I am so excited. I have been meaning to do this for a ridiculously long time, honestly. I think I was put on this earth to yap and to connect with people, and the fact that it has taken me this long to finally bite the bullet and do it, criminal, truly criminal, but I am so excited to see where this journey of YouTube takes me, and I'm just so glad that you are here watching. If you are, I love you and thank you so much. This is the start. You guys are experiencing it from day one. So today I thought, what better way to kick off this YouTube channel than a reading wrap up for one of the best reading months I think I've ever had. And I mean that quantity and quality. Honestly, I do not remember the last time that I had this many good consistent books, but then also I read so much. I have, I think, 8 books, fairly lengthy books, let me tell you that. Some fairly lengthy books to talk you through, and I have thoughts. I have so many thoughts. Let's get into it. So the first book that I picked up in September was a very fun one, and that is The Games Gods Play by Abigail Owen. This did have quite a big social media rollout, and I received actually a really pretty PR package with this, which came with like a crown, actually the crown's just here. There we go. It actually came with this really cute crown, and it came with a mug and a bunch of other really fun things as well. And I would best describe this as a Greek mythology crossing with the Hunger Games. So what essentially happens is all of the Greek gods that live on Mount Olympus, so that they can decide who is going to rule the Mount Olympus for the following 100 years or the following century, they all have to elect or choose a mortal being to compete in a competitive game. Every single god that is involved gets to create a trial to put these mortals through, and the mortal who has the most successful trials, their respective god gets to sit on the throne for the next 100 years. And this book is following our main girl Mira. I'm pretty sure that her name is Mira. It feels like a very long time ago that I read this. Is it Mira? Why can I not see it? What is your name? Lyra. Her name is Lyra. Oh my gosh, it feels like forever ago that I read this. But Lyra is actually the chosen mortal for the god of Zeus, and this is the very first time since the games begun, or the crucibles, that's what they're called, the trials, that Zeus has actually participated. So everyone is extremely curious as to why Zeus is now all of a sudden entering the games. So it is extremely fun and very, very bingeable. I'll definitely give it that. The chapters are almost borderline too short sometimes. I do sometimes feel like the scene was just building up just for them to cut it short, or almost like an entire scene would be broken up into like 3 or 4 chapters when really it didn't need to have a 3-page chapter, but it did also make the book go really quickly. I guess you can't have it both ways. So this was actually a lot of fun. The relationship that we followed through here, I could have given or taken, I'll be completely honest. I actually think it would have been more fun to see this as almost like a mentor-mentee relationship. I didn't personally find the relationship compelling or attractive or sexy, which I think was really, really trying to happen here. I kind of felt like the romance was a little bit forced. I didn't see their relationship. I didn't understand why he liked her. I know that in a lot of these like Greek retellings, because this is set in modern day, so it was a little bit hard to get my head around at first, trying to marry the setting of almost like Roman, like old Roman times with modern day technology also taking place, and the language was extremely colloquial. So that was sometimes a little bit weird to get my head around, but I will give it to it though. This book had me on the edge of my seat pretty much at the end of every single chapter. Even if I did think that there were too many chapters, I won't lie, I did think that all of the trials were so interesting. They were so high stakes. People were getting killed off left, right, and center. I had no idea where the plot was going at all. And for that element of it, I actually think this would make a phenomenal book to screen adaptation. So much fun. I just think that, yeah, personally the relationship with the 2 main characters completely just didn't do it for me, and I did think this was going to be a standalone, but then when we got to the end, I wasn't expecting what happened to happen, and I really think I would have preferred if this just kind of like wrapped itself up and that was the end. That's just my personal preference. I also just think that this book at times did feel like it was dragging unnecessarily, but for the rest of the time though, I'm not gonna lie, I was having a really great time. So I think I rated this just like a flat 4 stars. A flat 4 stars, which I mean is still really good. I would still definitely say go out and read this. It was a lot of fun. The next book that I finished in September was actually an audiobook that I had been reading through the month of August as well, and that is Eldest. This is the second book to Eragon. I'm sure we're all pretty familiar with the blue cover of Eragon, so I actually finally continued this series after reading the first book back when I was in middle school, and I am so grateful that I continued this series because I had no idea how complex and how interesting this is going to get. This really reminds me of like if if Lord of the Rings was made more YA, that is what I think of when I was reading this book. We have elves, we have dwarves, we have mortals, we have dragons, it's so intricate and so interesting, and I thought that this book in particular was just amazing. The audiobook as well was just so much fun to listen along to. These books just do continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and I won't lie, they do take a long time to get through, but I actually am on my way through the third at the moment, and I strongly recommend this series. I feel like this does not get spoken about nearly enough on the bookish spaces. I think there's something a little bit missing for me to make it a full 5-star feeling, but I still had such an incredible time, and I'm so intrigued to see where the rest of the plot goes as I make my way through the rest of the series. I think there's 4 books in this series, so if you haven't read them and you like high fantasy, would I call it high fantasy actually? Yeah, no, I'd call it high fantasy. I would definitely pick this up. I then did the biggest 180 known to reader kind and picked up Done and Dusted by Lila Sage, which, if you aren't aware, is a kind of fluffy, spicy, very short and quick romance book. And I have not really read cowboy romances, if I'm completely honest. I have not yee-hawed the way that everybody else has been yee-hawing. I did try one, I think about 12 months ago, and it wasn't really my thing, but oh my god, I loved this. I can't believe how much I enjoyed this. For something that is relatively short, I thought that this was so much fun. If you aren't familiar with the Rebel Blue Ranch series, this is a couple of interconnected standalones. I think the third is about to come out at the end of the year, that revolve around Rebel Blue Ranch. Crazy. And this one follows a girl who is a professional horse rider, where something happens that makes her want to go back to her hometown, which she hasn't been back to in quite some time. And she then is reacquainted with her brother's best friend. I think you can kind of guess where brother's best friend trope usually goes, but I think that this was just on so many fronts so much fun. I think I ended up rating this a 4.25. I loved our main character Luke. Oh my god, he was great. And I also found Emmy, our FMC, extremely relatable as well. I just think that for a short book, it was so solid. There was no wasted pages. This was actually the first time that I had annotated and tabbed a book in a hot minute. So I thought this was so much fun, and I'm actually reading the second book this month. So I'm not a huge romance reader, but Done and Dusted, it did it for me. It did it for me. I'm not ashamed to admit it. Also, the whiskey scene. I get it, girls. I absolutely get the infatuation with Luke Brooks now. I do. The whiskey scene. Oh my god, I've thought about that a few times since I read this book. The next book I read in September was arguably one of the best books I think I've read this year, and that is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. Oh my goodness, 5 stars. I'm just gonna say that off the bat. 5 stars. I actually initially rated it, I think, a 4.75, and then went back about a week later and said, I can't stop thinking about this book. It's a 5-star. It is a 5-star read. This is about Dracula's wife, and it is essentially, I believe, written in second person, which is one of the first books I've ever read in second person, and I wasn't sure how I was going to find it, but I actually loved the way that it worked for this. The format of this book is essentially written as love letters from Dracula's wife to Dracula, explaining why she has killed him. Let that sink in for a second. It is essentially love letters to him after his death, explaining sort of in a confessional, but also in a love letter as to why she ended him. And that's not a spoiler, it's quite literally on the back of the book. But it is just utterly phenomenal. The writing is up there with one of the most beautiful writings that I have ever read. I think the amount that I underlined, annotated, tabbed, this is littered with annotations. My friend worded it perfectly, actually. She said it was almost like a love letter to your abuser, and I think it was done immaculately. I almost don't really want to tell you much else about it, just because I really want you to go in as blind as possible. There are trigger warnings at the very start of the book, so obviously read those ones before you dive into it if you're interested in it. But this is, again, short and sweet, but I just feel like it did such an incredible job of making me feel so much for our main characters and hate some of our other main characters in such a poetic, beautiful, painful way. There is just so much about this that I think about on a regular basis, and I wish I'd picked this up sooner. I want to go and see what else she's written, because if her writing stays like that, she might be up there with one of my favorite authors. This was incredible. 5 stars. 5 stars. We're going into spring here in Australia, which I know is very backwards for pretty much the rest of the world, but I was after that gothic, romantic, but yet very dark book that I just finished, A Dowry in Blood. I really wanted to read something that felt a little bit more like the weather that I had outside, and so I picked up a novel love story by Ashley Poston. This is her newest release, and it is always based around magical realism, and one of her other titles, The 7-Year Slip, is one of my favorite romance novels I think I have ever read, and so I had very high expectations for this book. It's it's not fair to necessarily put that on a book, but I went into this hoping to absolutely love it because of how much I loved her writing in The 7 Year Slip. The general premise of this book is you are following a girl called Eileen, and she is on a very, very, very long stretch of a heartbreak that she just can't seem to quite move past. And every year she meets up with a particular book club where they all sit and read romance books in a cabin for a week. And in this year round, she really is looking forward to it, but everyone can't make it. So she decides she's going to go alone. And on her drive there, while she's driving there alone, her car breaks down in the pouring rain. And so she takes the closest turn that she can down a little gravelly road and ends up in this small town. And little does she know that she has actually arrived at the small town of her favorite romance series. The one that she is currently reading, she has actually fallen into that romance story. Which, I mean, premise alone, that is phenomenal. Can you imagine your favorite story and then falling into it? Probably not a fantasy, because I'm not gonna lie, I'd probably die in about 5 seconds, but romance-wise, imagine getting to meet all of your favorite bookish characters, all of your favorite locations where they maybe go for coffee, or maybe all of those little special moments in a book where you're like, oh, that's where they had their third act breakup, or this is where the I love you confession happened. Imagine being able to go and visit those spaces. Just imagine. Anyway, she gets to do this. I won't say much more than that, but I just want to say that this book grew on me the more I read it and the more time I've had away from the book. While I was reading it, I definitely think that the first, I want to say 90 to 100 pages was particularly slow, and I was starting to feel really disappointed that I wasn't going to love, maybe The 7 Year Slip was a one-off that I really liked from her, but I can confirm that after about that 100 page mark, 90, 100 page mark, this book completely took off for me, and I actually adore it. I now look back on this with so many fond memories, and the characters just have grown a little space in my heart. I think her writing, her charm and her beautiful takeaways, they came in through the second half of the book way more than the first half. And I just think that first part, we didn't get given nearly enough to feel connected to the characters, but by the end of it, I think that this book was so special. I do. I think it was so special. Do I think that it was better than The 7 Year Slip? I still think that The 7 Year Slip is still better in my opinion. So I think I rated this a 4.25 stars, and I think that's a pretty accurate rating for how I felt about it. I don't think I am absolutely obsessed with it, but I also think that it was such a charming, special, unique story, and I do have to say though that I think the third act breakup was kind of ridiculous, and a little bit that is part of the reason why I don't think I liked it nearly as much as I could have. I thought it was a little bit are you absolutely joking right now? This is what we're going to decide to do with the characters. I think it detracted a fair bit from the final ending being as sweet as it could have, because that third act, I understand it, but I feel like there were so many other ways we could have gone about doing what we needed to do without absolutely butchering everything we worked hard for, just my personal opinion. But anyway, 4.25 stars. I then listened to my second audiobook for the month, and that was The Grandest Game by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. She also does have another book coming out, I think, this month, and I'm so excited for it. This is a spin-off series to The Inheritance Game. So Brothers Hawthorne is apparently a bridge book, and that is just here. So I listened to this one back in August and wasn't the biggest fan of it, but it was supposedly supposed to transition us into this new series that she has written. So The Grandest Game is following Avery Grahams, who is a main character in the original trilogy, and she's hosting a game with a 16 million or 26 million, one of the two, a ridiculous amount of money prize for a select few people who get invited to play these games or find a lottery ticket. Kind of think Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. There are some people who just find these tickets here, there, and everywhere if you can solve certain clues. Otherwise, people do get given a ticket at random and they don't really get to find out why. If you do get invited into the game, these games are essentially like a riddle room. And if you know anything about me, competitions, puzzles, riddle rooms are literally just part of who I am. I love them. I love dissecting things. I love analyzing things. I just think that they are so much fun. Riddle rooms are just my jam. I absolutely adore one. I literally did one 2 weeks ago. So I loved this so much, especially as an audiobook, because we had different voice actors and we were following multiple different characters through these games. I adored this. I don't think that is a popular opinion for some reason on this book. Not that it's greatly disliked, but I actually rated this a 4.5 stars. I found it so entertaining. I just thought this was maybe just a me thing, in the sense of this is just right up my alley, and I cannot wait for the installment of number 2, just because you have no idea who to trust. These riddles, you never feel like you have any chance of actually solving, but you do have fun trying to see whether or not you can like follow along and solve the problems with them, but the cast of characters was so much fun. And we do also get a lot more page time of a specific brother that I think a lot of people seem to be very attached to in the inheritance games. Everyone loves Grayson. Everyone absolutely loves Grayson, and you get a lot of page time with Grayson. So if that intrigues you at all, you're welcome. So definitely get your eyes across this if you enjoy puzzles, riddles, a mystery. It left off on the most excruciating cliffhanger though. I cannot wait. I think it's like another 8 months or something like that, maybe even longer until we get the next installment. But this was great. This was so great. 4.5 stars. I then this month actually attempted a 24-hour readathon, and the first book that I picked up, I must be on an Ashley Poston kick, was The Dead Romantics. It was the last book of hers that I had yet to read, and I just really wanted to have read her entire backlog. Like, I just think that it's such a fun feeling to feel like you've read everything and you're up to date with their releases. And I have really conflicting feelings about this book. It's almost like the opposite effect of when I read the novel Love Story. I feel like the longer I spend away from this book, the less memorable it is. I didn't feel any connection, I'm going to be completely honest, between our two main characters. I think that they were great as friends, and I think we could have done like an acquaintance to friendship kind of a thing, but we somehow jumped to lovers within like 5 days. And the whole circumstance with which they met, I don't know how we got to them being lovers so quickly with so little interactions. I feel like their entire connection was just them bonding over a traumatic circumstance, or them both being in really unfortunate situations. I just don't see at all how they had a connection or how they even knew each other enough, let alone loved each other. And then the premise itself, I think, started off really great. And once again, I do think her writing is never the thing that I necessarily think is the flaw in this. I truly just feel that the takeaways that I usually get from her writing was severely missing in this. I wasn't really sure what the plot was really trying to achieve or send home for us. I thought that the plot honestly flatlined for a good portion of this book, in the sense of nothing was really happening. None of the characters were really growing particularly. None of them were growing on me, that's for damn sure. And I just kind of felt like I wasn't sure what I was supposed to take away from this beyond kind of like life is short. And I think something that really, really annoyed me was our female main character having such a one-dimensional pessimistic outlook on love. Like, she had a shitty relationship. We've all had some sort of shitty breakup, shitty relationship where we feel like, where you might start questioning like, oh, how do I even find love in this world? But I feel like she took this whole narrative of love is dead, love is not for me, I'm never going to find love, happy endings just don't exist, and it started to just feel like we were flogging a dead horse. Like, truly, I was getting so sick of that same narrative just being repeated over and over and over. Of course, it's a romance novel, she wasn't going to stay that way forever, but it truly did just feel like, okay girl, you've had some bad luck in a relationship, so now romance is completely and utterly dead? I don't know, maybe other people can relate to this in a different way. There were also topics of grief in this where I think that they were discussed in her other books in a way that really made me feel something. Like, I really empathized with the characters. I'd find myself crying and tearing up over the way that it was expressed. But in this, for some reason, I just felt so detached. I don't know what was going on. I felt detached from pretty much everything that went on in this novel. There was one moment where I teared up, and the rest of it I was kind of just ready for it to be done, which is kind of unfortunate. So I think I initially landed on like a 3.25 stars, but I think it's probably more of a 3-star read for me now that I think about all the things that I'm complaining about. I just don't think this is my type of romance book, if I'm completely honest. I'm sure some other people probably take things from it that I'm not. I still definitely think I would recommend it to others because I think this is more of a personal taste thing and maybe what you can relate to, but it wasn't personally a standout for me at all, so 3 stars. And then the very last book that I finished off the month of September with was Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. And this is a very short and sweet fantasy where it is set in like a Regency time, Regency era. For a long portion of this book, I really wasn't sure whether or not this was set in our real world or if it was set in a fantasy world, but they did mention London once or twice. So I think it actually is set in our world, but just very, very vaguely. And it does include fae, and I would almost akin this to the way of Emily Wilde's Explaining Fae. This is not big, sexy, winged men. How do I even describe them? They're kind of seen as extremely dangerous to mortals, and they aren't really given a lot more depth beyond them actually just being quite cruel to mortals. Now, this book had actually been on my radar for quite a long time because I thought the premise was just so interesting. This follows a girl called Theodora, and when she's young, she has a run-in with a particularly nasty fae, and he quite literally takes half of her soul. hence the title of the book. He takes half of her soul, and so she's essentially unable to feel quite a lot of emotions. She is almost painfully neutral about everything. She can't feel extreme joy, but she also can't feel extreme sadness. She also can't really pick up on social cues. She's honestly just really quite blunt and forthright, and to be honest, I actually thought that she was really quite interesting. She has a really, really fun wit about her, but because of her inability to pick up social cues, she has quite a hard time finding a match or finding a husband. And because this is set in a Regency setting, because she is in her teens and she hasn't got a husband already, she is getting taken off to London so that she can potentially go to court and find a man. When I was reading this, I truly had no idea where the plot was going, and I actually had a lot of fun reading this. I definitely don't think it is anything that is going to stand out per se, and it's not super memorable if I'm totally honest. That may have also had something to do with the fact that I read this within the 24-hour readathon that I was doing, and I was quite tired. But I definitely think it's fun, and I definitely would recommend it to people, but I just think that it was quite shallow. Like, it's only so much you can accomplish within like 260 pages, and I do think that it tackled some interesting topics in the way of like social classes and hierarchies, and how a lot of the lower classes can often get swept under the rug for the convenience by the blissfully ignorant upper classes. And there was some interesting commentary in that space. And our male main character, he's a magician, and it was quite, I don't know, I feel like we almost didn't get to know him quite well enough, but he was quite charming at the same time. I do think their relationship was quite interesting because it wasn't just this like sweet, innocent, romantic courting. It was more they were doing things behind people's backs and plotting and scheming a little bit to be able to further their agenda of looking after the people who were being mistreated. But it was fun. I do think it was fun. It is apparently a part of a series, I believe. I don't know if I'll be continuing the series. I don't feel a particular urge to pick up the next one, but I do think it was an interesting premise, and I think I ended up landing on like a 3.5 star for this one. It was just light and fun and exactly what I needed at the time. That sun is absolutely blinding me. So this is everything that I read in the month of September. I hope you had a great reading month, my loves. I am so excited to continue making YouTube videos. I'm beyond excited for what is to come. So thank you so much if you've made it this far. I'm so grateful for you being here, and I will see you in a little while, but hopefully not too long. Bye.